Welcome to Better Mental Health, a podcast for men looking to build a resource and community around destigmatizing men's mental health. I'm Blair.
I'm Blake.
And I'm Jamie. And today we are joined by my good friend, Josh Lavine. And I met Josh many, many years ago in a spiritual deep work course focused on the Enneagram, which is a personality tool that describes 9 interconnected personality types, each with their own core motivations, fears, and patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. From that experience, Josh took the Enneagram into his own hands and has developed a coaching business and website. It's a great resource for anyone wanting to dive deeper into the typologies and understand more about themselves on a deeper level. Along with the Enneagram School, Josh coaches founders, investors, and executives in leadership and transformative inner work. On top of all of that, Josh is currently writing a book on the structure of the Enneagram and why it works.
So in this episode, we asked Josh to talk through the intersection of the tool of the Enneagram and how it integrates with both mental health and therapy. So with that, let's jump into the episode.
All right. Josh, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I think we wanted to just get started by having you attempt to run through the Enneagram and tell us about the 9 types. Just give us an overview of the Enneagram and in your words. What number would you want to start with?
Why don't we just do the traditional way of starting with 8 and then going around the circle? Yeah. And I'll explain why we start with 8 instead of 1.
Yeah. I actually didn't know that was something that people did. All right.
Yeah. So first and most importantly, the Enneagram is based on dimensions of our experience that we name as body, heart, and mind. So that's like the fundamental triad in the Enneagram. And there are 3 body types, 3 heart types, and 3 mental types. We start with 8 because 8 is the first type in the body center. 8, 9, and 1 are body types. 2, 3, and 4 are heart types, and 5, 6, and 7 are mental types. And what I understand these to be, like body, heart, and mind, they have very specific meanings in the Enneagram context. The body center is about how we assert our boundaries against the environment and manage the sensory impact of the world upon us, and how we defend our autonomy. And types 8, 9, and 1 are different strategies for trying to use our life force on our own terms, not being bothered by things we don't want to be bothered by, etc. In the heart center is all about managing the field of attention. So your attention upon me, my attention upon you. Am I being paid attention to in a way that, like, are you regarding me in a positive, loving light, or are you not? Do you not like me? What's the quality of your attention on me? Types 2, 3, and 4 are strategies for getting the right kind of attention that they're seeking. And in the mental center, types 5 and 6 and 7, the mental center is all about sense making, wayfinding, determining what is true, and what sources I can trust to guide me, whether it's I can only trust my own mind, or what experts out there I can trust, and what is worthy to incorporate into my map of reality. So 5, 6, 7 are different strategies for doing that. So one thing that's important to say is that even if you're a body type, you have each center. So you have a heart and a mind. And this is a slightly more advanced Enneagram concept, but I think it's important to say up front is that you have kind of like a type in each center. So as we go through the 9 types, then you might identify with one very strongly, but you can kind of pay attention to which body type feels the most like home, which heart type feels the most like home, and which mental type feels the most like home for you.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we call that the trifix, the constellation of your body, heart, and mind altogether.
Okay. I did see that term. I was like, anything that we've discussed, Jamie got us into the Enneagram a long time ago. I had not heard that term. So, okay. That is where you fall on each of the different body types, area types.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The combination of your body type, your heart type, and your mental type. Sometimes the word type is substituted for fixation because a type is essentially a fixated way of being. And we shorten that to fix. So the trifix is the 3 fixes.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, okay, going through the 9 types briefly. In the body center, we have 8, 9, and 1. And this is how we manage our sovereignty and our boundaries against the environment and manage what we don't want to have affecting us. Type 8 preemptively asserts its boundary by having a kind of somatic fortification and density, and essentially taking the attitude that I'm not going to be affected by the world, but I am going to affect it. That's the 8 sort of attitude. Type 9 takes a kind of soft, receptive, porous, infusible attitude, or I'm saying attitude, but it's really somatic. It's a body-based sensibility. It's like when 9s enter a room, they can't help but be infused by the environmental energies and agendas and things like that are in it. So very big contrast to 8, where 8 is preemptively bounded against energetic impact. 9 is receiving it, kind of in the hope that whatever's available in the environment will hold me. It will be pleasant. I want to be like peaceful and settled and harmonious.
Yep.
And kind of the strategy for 9 is that when the world isn't harmonious, then I try to settle with it anyway. And that can lead to a kind of numbing or dissociation, as we talk about. We'll get more into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We all smile.
yeah, you guys are all nodding. Yeah.
Yeah. It lands.
So 1 is the final strategy in the body sensor. And essentially 1 is just like all the body types, wanting to feel kind of unbothered and peaceful and settled with my environment. But with 1, anytime something enters my field of sensation that makes me wince or is annoying, like the painting's crooked on the wall, or you're saying something in a way that's, it's not resonating with that kind of felt sense inner tuning fork, 1 winces and then attempts to go fix whatever is caused the irritation. So sometimes we call the type 1 the reformer. I call it the alignment seeker, but it's like that impulse to go fix what is wrong in my environment is it's kind of like the core of 1, you could say.
Gotcha.
And then
Okay.
adopting a posture of tension and rigidity as a defense against environmental irritation.
Ooh. Okay. This is making sense. Like even just these 3 with the people that I know who are these types, I'm like, it all fits. And that's, I think, what is always so fascinating to me when I learn more about the Enneagram. I'm like, it just fits so well. And it's not one of those that like any number or any type or fix can be attributed to any person. It's like it very specifically describes individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that's probably useful to say up front here is that as I talk through the 9 types, each Enneagram type is not a static list of traits and behaviors. It's a vertical spectrum of attitudes and ways of being along a spectrum of psychological health or well-being. And so, you know, I talk about like the rigidity of 1, that's like the fixated average levels of 1. But then when they're really healthy, they become a little more open and more serene and all that kind of stuff. And so we talk about 9 being numb and dissociated in the fixated levels, sort of settling with environmental irritations and kind of suppressing their anger. But in the healthy levels, they're more willing to confront environmental irritations and inhabit themselves in a fuller way. Just to set that up, because I know this is a whole mental health framing, but that's, there's a spectrum, you know, within each type.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting when I sort of introduce the Enneagram to others in my life is when they kind of find their type and they read the description, the fixated aspects of it is where everybody feels like they've been called out. Like, oh, that describes me perfectly. And I think it's because we have a tendency to like look at those more, I guess you'd call them negative parts of our personality. And sometimes reading those fixated descriptions on the type that matches with you, it feels like you've just been identified and like, oh yeah, I know I do that. I know I do that sometimes. I know I do that in these situations. And that's where I think people start to realize, oh yeah, that's where I identify with that specific type.
That's why we all got smiles on our face.
When you find the healthy side of it too, then you feel kind of vindicated as well, because we're all so complex, obviously, but we have a tendency, I think, to focus on the negative when there's lots of positives associated with each type too.
Yeah, well said. And some Enneagram teachers, including me, go so far as to say, if you don't feel personally called out by your type description, then you might not be on the right one, or you might not be looking closely enough.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that's so accurate. I have questions about the ones that you've described so far. How are we wanting to do this? You want to still go through the rest and then come back to the questions, or would you rather just jump right in?
I think it makes sense to just round out the Enneagram so people who are listening have a sense of the totality.
Perfect. Let's do it.
So moving on to the heart sensor, remember the heart sensor is about how we manage attention, other people's attention, and how we receive the impact of others' attention and regard upon us. So type 2 is the type that is wanting like a loving, connected, warm, interpersonal attention. And essentially very similar to the 8, where the 8 is like, I am not going to be impacted by the environment, but I am going to impact it. 2 takes that same approach in the layer of attention, where it's like sort of suppressing my need to be seen or not believing that it's possible, but I am going to go out to you and I'm going to see you. So it's like, you're not going to see me, but I'm going to see you. I'm going to attune to you. I'm going to shower you with my love and attention and attunement, and I'm going to anticipate your needs. And I'm going to be so loving that you sort of almost won't even have a choice but to be so appreciative and loving towards me that I'll get the attention I want. So that's like, type 2 structure. And just in the interest of time and consistency, I'm going to kind of just be doing this in the fixated levels, because that's where the psychological juice is. We could talk about the health as well. So type 3 is the type that is the most open and receptive and affected by other people's positive or negative regard upon them. Type 3s want to be admired, seen as outstanding, like, wow, incredible, good job, that kind of stuff. 3s sort of feed on that type of attention and make it their business to become the type of person that attracts that type of attention. So they manifest their potentials and their skills and their capacities, and they want that reaction from you that's like, wow, you're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And when they don't get that, they work harder to become more of the type of person, or they shapeshift and adapt into what they think you will value, that type of a thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Type 4 is, and actually it might be useful to draw a parallel there with the 9. So in the same way that 9 is open and receptive and porous to environmental impact, 3 is also open and porous and receptive to environmental gaze and attention.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And similar kind of adaptation strategy, you could say. So type 4 in the heart center is the type that is kind of like 1 in the body center, where it's like anything that makes me wince, I need to go fix that thing, or it's like, oh, that wasn't quite right. Like, it's not aligning with my inner tuning fork. Type 4 is any gaze that you give me, any way that you're regarding me, there's something that's wrong about it. There's something you're not quite seeing me correctly. You're not quite understanding me. And 4s wince internally and then kind of get fussy about the attention they're getting, and then essentially dismiss you and the gaze source for being superficial, not having the quality of gaze that you can actually tune to my depth. And they sort of expand that as well into a worldview where everything is boring, dumb, stupid, because nobody knows how to pay the right kind of attention to anything, and beauty is lost, and all that kind of stuff. So there's like a kind of resting attitude of disdain as a way to, again, in the heart center, it's all about this attention, and there's like this deep need to be attuned to in a loving, precise way. But 4s sort of have given up the hope that, they can be attuned to in the loving, precise way. So to substantiate their sense of self-worth, they kind of dismiss almost preemptively other people's gaze, like become skeptical of gaze. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I've seen that in action.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the heart center. And then finally moving to the mental center. So again, mental center is all about sense making, wayfinding, figuring out what's true, how to orient reliably in the world. And type 5 essentially sets out to do this in almost radical mental isolation. It's essentially taking the attitude that I can't trust anybody else's mind. I have to trust my own. Everyone else is comforting themselves with delusions. And, the classic type 5 example is like, as a 5-year-old, I'm at my grandmother's funeral, and I watch her body go into the ground, and then someone comes over to me and says, Grandma's in a better place now. And as a 5, that lands upon me as a kind of intellectual affront. Like, I just watched her go down there, and everyone seems to be lying to me. And so you can see how that develops into a worldview of the only person I can trust is myself to determine what's true.
Yeah.
I'd imagine your work with, CEOs and coaching, you might run into a lot of 5s.
So 5s are pretty rare. I think I've only run into one true 5.
Wow. Okay.
And he's probably the smartest investor I've ever met. But that's the thing about 5s is that, like, extremely original, independent thinking, willing to be iconoclastic and not adhere to conventional ways of doing things. And so they have a lot of original insight, but they're also sometimes living on an intellectual island.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So 6 is the type that is, again, trying to orient reliably, and in almost complete contrast to 5, basically says, well, I'm just like one small person here, and people have probably walked down the path further than I have and figured things out. And so where's a mentor I can trust? Where's external guidance that I can use to figure out what is going on around here? Who can I ask? What recipes can I follow? And so 6s start kind of consciously or unconsciously constructing a map of the world using snippets of other people's maps. And two things can happen with that, again, in the fixated levels, is that 6s, in so doing, can lose touch with their own inner guidance. They can stop trusting their own discernment, because it's kind of like, well, I'm just me. Someone else might have figured this out better. And also, as they stitch together this map of experts, it's kind of like there's a lot of contradictions that end up forming. For example, if you're living your life based on expert advice and you ask the question, just any mundane life question, like, what's the healthiest way to eat? You can find 25 experts who have different opinions. And so where do you go with that? Who do you trust? And so 6s run into the problem of wanting to trust someone but they also have to vet who they're going to trust, which again runs into the problem of inner guidance. And so that's the whole 6 sensibility.
Paralysis
Okay.
by analysis type
Yes.
thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so that's 6. 7, and I'll draw the parallel again. So in the body center and the heart center, we had 8 and 2 that were kind of like, you're not going to impact me, but I'm going to impact you. That's 5 in the mental center. I'm not going to be oriented by you, but I will orient you.
Gotcha.
So we have 9 and 3 that are in the body center and the heart center are kind of open and porous and receptive to what the environment is giving it. Same with the 6, right? Like receptive to external guidance, open to it, wanting it. Yeah. And then similar with 1 and 4. So we're 1 and 4 both kind of wincing against whatever the environment is providing in the body center and the heart center. Type 7 is doing that in the mental center. Type 7 is wanting to orient itself in a way that will be kind of the most optimally fulfilling. 7 wants to be like fulfilled, nourished, have like the most optimally wonderful life. And they're trying to orient themselves in a way that that kind of life is like certain. You know, they want certainty that they're going to have an amazing life. And they're holding a kind of internal ideal of what it is that they want and need to feel fully nourished and fulfilled. And anytime someone says, you know, external guidance, someone comes and says, hey, this is what you need to do to live a great life. 7 compares that advice against their inner ideal and says, actually, I don't think so. I want to do this instead.
Wow. Okay.
So 1, 4, and 7 are kind of like comparing what the environment gives it against some internal ideal and then being loyal to the inner ideal over environmental input. And 7 doing that in the mental center is kind of like 7s have like sometimes a visionary sensibility of like whatever reality is presenting isn't good enough. It would be so much better if we did X, or this apple could taste better if we put cinnamon on it, or if this vibe would be better if the music was different, or whatever. But there's a certain like fussy, like trying to uplift and improve reality into my fantasy vision that 7s are kind of constantly doing. Okay, so maybe I'll pause there. That's the 9 types in brief.
Yeah, I love the added, you know, different areas of the heart, mind, and body. My first question was just for reference. The 3 of us, Jamie, Blake, and I are all 9s. I think we've said it before, but I want to make sure we're reiterating that to the listeners.
And I'm a 3, by the way.
I felt that a little bit when you were describing a 3.
Yeah.
With 9 being the body-centered one, I feel like maybe this is going to get a little too out there, but the 3 of us also did grow up in Christian Science, which is the fundamental belief that like the physical reality is not real and we're all spiritual beings. So I feel like I can only speak to my own experience in growing up in that environment, but I feel like I had a very hard time connecting, and I still do, with like my somatic experience or my physical body. Being a 9, I feel like there's something that I might be missing within like my actual type, because I'm like, all right, I'm not feeling like I can attune to like my somatic experience and kind of make decisions from that. I don't know if there's a question in that. Well, maybe more just an observation.
An observation.
I felt like we were all smiling as we were here going through the different types, because, you know, just knowing individuals in our lives that we know which type they are, and just going, yep, that makes sense. And that's why I really resonated with the Enneagram as opposed to like other personality tests that I've done like for work and things like that. Is I feel like it really carries through in your personal, at least for me, my personal life, work life. I've never connected more with the description of the 9 type than through other personality profiles that I've done. Maybe that could kind of lead into my question for you, Josh, which is, how did you come across the Enneagram, and why did you feel like this was something you wanted to pursue? Had you done other personality profile tests as well, or was this kind of your first venture into this type of space?
Yeah, I had not done other personality profiles before. I was ambiently aware of them, as I guess people are, but I came to the Enneagram because at the time, so Jamie and I took the first ever Enneagram class that I took together. And the reason I took that class was because I was living in St. Louis at the time, and I had been playing piano professionally at piano bars for a few years. And actually, it's probably worth it to just say a little bit more about my life story to lead up to this moment and why it was so impactful to me. So I grew up in a culture that really valued academic achievement, and then I ended up getting into Princeton and going to Princeton. And for high school, I went to a very small Jewish private school. There were 39 kids in my graduating class, and I was also the first graduating class of that high school. So I was in 9th grade. There was only 9th grade, and then 10th grade there was 9th. So I was essentially a senior for 4 years, and the quality of attention from faculty was extremely high, and I loved my high school experience. I had an amazing high school experience. But because it was so new and fresh, we could do anything we wanted. and I was involved in every possible activity. I was on every sports team. I was in the math club. I did everything. And then when I got to Princeton, I thought I could do the same. And so I was in a dance company, and I was like going out and partying every night, and I was taking the hardest possible math and physics classes.
Oh my God.
I had this experience, which I think is common for Princeton students, but I do actually think that it was sort of slightly more extreme in my case, given where I came from. But the confrontation with one's own mediocrity relative to the peers that are at that kind of an institution.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that was just not knowing who I really was, and not knowing what my strengths were, and not knowing how to like double down on this. But just this casting myself out into too many activities and wanting to be popular, wanting to be well liked. Again, this is all, I didn't know it was an Enneagram 3 at the time, but this is all Enneagram 3 kind of material.
Yeah.
Wanting to get, all A's effortlessly, wanting to be like the big man on campus, wanting to be attractive to all the girls. Just all of that was kind of the fantasy vision that didn't manifest itself freshman year. I was getting like B's for the first time in my life, and I was having to work really hard, but also didn't really know how to work hard because I had like kind of skated through high school. Anyway, long story short, I ended up getting very depressed because my personality structure wasn't working for me. The things that I was used to doing to get accolades and wonderful attention from teachers, they weren't working. And I was feeling like a failure. I was feeling like a nobody. What really precipitated it was I injured myself. I tore my ACL, and that kind of like started a whole unraveling of my psyche. And so I ended up withdrawing for a year and going home and getting therapy. And at the worst of it, it was like, and I'm kind of going indulgent here just because I know this is a mental health podcast, but like,
Please.
yeah, at the worst of it, I was, I was living in a 1-bedroom by myself, like a very, very small dorm, crutching around campus with like a cast on, and just like spending hours in my room wondering why I wasn't getting A's and crying. And just, it was a very, very lonely, terrifying time.
Mm-hmm.
Just like obsessive about needing to get good grades and needing to be well liked and needing to be respected by professors and stuff like that. All that like Enneagram 3 stuff.
Yeah.
So went home, got therapy, came back, and then ended up finishing out Princeton. But that kind of psychological self-confrontation and crash and burn at that age set me up, I think, for having a life of interiority.
Say what that means, interiority.
Yeah.
I guess I just mean like a psychologically minded life.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah. A life of persistent self-analysis, you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like why is this happening to me? Or why am I like this? Or what happened? And so part of that whole journey was me confronting this pattern that I had of like being so desperate for approval and validation and losing myself so immensely in that pursuit. And what I realized during that, and then after college as well, because the pattern kind of came up again after college. It was the same thing, so I don't need to repeat it. But it's basically, I was amazed and dumbfounded at how powerful this urge was to like earn validation, pump up my resume, be impressive. And like, for example, after college, I remember catching myself in a moment where I was strategizing like, okay, maybe I could do Teach for America for 2 years, and then I could apply to a Fulbright, and then from there I could apply to Stanford Law School. And then I was like, wait, maybe not Stanford Law School, maybe engineering school. And I caught myself thinking, I don't actually know what I want to do for my life. I just want my resume to look impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And that realization at the time, I was like disgusted with myself. I just knew that that's not the person I wanted to be. I wanted to live an authentic life. I became obsessed with this word authenticity and what did it mean to live from the inside out and not from the outside in. And how do I love myself enough not to care about and not be so influenced by whatever external expectations might be in the environment. And so that was the journey that led me to deciding to become a piano player and work at a piano bar.
And did you mention you did not know how to play piano when you made this decision?
I did not know how to play piano. Right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was, so that's the story is I learned how to play piano and got a job at a piano bar and was a very happy camper for a while. And actually it's probably worth saying just one thing about that as a type 3, like one of the things of type 3 is that when they get focused on something, one of their gifts is that they can really focus and cultivate their skills almost unlike any other type. And so that was a moment of me kind of, I don't know, leaning into one of my type 3 strengths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Within all that, I found myself being curious about how therapy was helping your understanding of wanting to live a more authentic life. Was that through therapy, or were you having that internal dialogue outside of that space?
It was not through therapy. It
Ooh,
was,
okay.
yeah, I guess I'll just like really pull back the veil here. So
Psychedelics.
not yet. Not yet. That can
Okay.
not yet. Yeah. So one of the ideas in the Enneagram is the idea that as you are descending the levels of health within your type structure, if you're like kind of far down there, you don't have access to presence, you don't have access to like genuine self-awareness. But what you do have is kind of the saving grace, which is the primary agenda and thrust of your type. So for example, as a 3, I still wanted to be even at this level, I was like, I knew that I wanted to be admirable, valuable, attractive. And I knew that if I kept being the way I was being, I was not going to be those things.
Mm.
And so the core drive of my own type kind of propelled me into this life of, okay, let me become a valuable person, but in my own way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? The other thing, the
sure.
word authenticity came to me through studying how to pick up girls.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was like watching YouTube videos of like dating coaches talking about how to be an attractive man. And I got really interested in this one dating coach whose entire philosophy was the most attractive thing you can be is authentic, because your self-congruence shows up in a conversation with a girl, and that's what she's responding to, is like, how congruent are you with yourself? Or are you like not confident in some way? And a lack of confidence comes from a lack of self-congruence. That was the message I was getting. And so
that is so accurate in my experience too. Yeah. I love that.
yeah. So that was what planted the seed of authenticity in my head. But then it kind of expanded from there. Like, I'm philosophically oriented. So I was like, what does it mean to be authentic? And how does one actually cultivate a life of authenticity? And so that led to basically me putting up a middle finger to my entire educational background and saying, I'm going to do this piano thing, even though my mom and grandfather and all that stuff were just sort of despondent about the whole thing. But I just, I was obsessed with it, and I needed to do it. Fast forwarding to the Enneagram class, when I learned about the Enneagram and I read about type 3, and I read about type 3's whole orientation around being obsessed with the approval of getting external validation, and the horsepower they have that they can summon into those projects, but how they can lose themselves in the pursuit of a version of success that's not their own. And all that stuff resonated at a very, very core deep level. And there was also in the very lower levels of 3, there's like a deceptive, opportunistic behaviors. And I had like confronted a lot of like some of the darker parts of my type 3 journey were like cheating in school to like earn the grade and stuff like that. And so I also, had a whole journey of confronting the shame that I had left myself and had compromised my integrity so deeply. And that's when I started really getting to therapy. So prior to the Enneagram, I wasn't really like that into therapy. But then the Enneagram, it produced a strong enough self-confrontation that I looked like I shined a light in the psychological basement, and then actually saw the demons that were there and stopped kind of running away from them. And then Jamie was there with me, like for the first, many years of this, of just working through all that. So that's why the Enneagram had such a powerful impact on me.
Yeah. I think you're highlighting something that's really important, which is sometimes with the self-awareness that comes from the Enneagram and the things you learn, it can sort of bring on a sense of depression. At least I experienced this. Like you start to realize all these negative aspects of yourself. And at the time we were in the class that we were in, I didn't have therapy. And I think that it would have been a really valuable resource to use in conjunction with learning about the Enneagram, because it allows you to take all that information and process it in a different way. So yeah, I think it's just a good insight when starting to explore this. Be careful with it, because it can be really intense as you learn.
Not to get too far away from the Enneagram itself, but I think it's important to like touch on. So Josh, you obviously grew up being very successful in academia. I imagine your family was proud, or maybe just had the expectation that you would succeed well in that respect. So you mentioned it a little bit, but moving into doing the thing with playing the piano for a living, and now with your focus being on the Enneagram, you've kind of moved away from that traditional academic life. What was your family's reaction, and how did you work around that? Because I think that's a challenge for a lot of young people, is I'm not following the expectations of my family. I want to do my own thing, but how do I do that without either just dealing with the repercussions from my family, or hopefully having them come around to it somehow. So how did you navigate that?
Good question. That was a really arduous journey. It's worth it to say that my family was ambivalent about my journey. I mean, on the one hand, they were very confused, sort of proud, but also like, what the hell are you doing kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather in particular, so my mom's dad, like he sat me down once for lunch and was like, you really can't do this. You need to go to law school or become a doctor or something like that. My mom also really struggled to accept it. My dad was kind of cool, but also had the, within their dynamic, I think he felt the need to kind of deliver my mom's message to me in his way. And anyway, so there were, like with any one of these kinds of journeys, there were lots of tensions. And I was so obsessed with the need to live an authentic life that's what steeled me, I guess, against the pressure. And let's see, I'm not really sure where to go from there.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No, it's okay. Are you asking like, how did I navigate those conversations, or like what kind of pressures did I experience? Or
yeah, anyone who's maybe realizing that they're not going to go down the path that their family maybe expected them to. It sounds like you went down that path, and I don't know what your relationship is like with your family now, but are you on good terms now? Did they come around to understanding where you're at, or did you have to have some tough conversations and set boundaries to let people know where you were at?
All the above. I had to have a number of very tough conversations and some very tough boundary setting moments, and those were difficult. I don't really know where this intensity of loyalty to self comes from. I really don't. I actually don't get it. It seems to me like a kind of grace or something. It's just something that I experienced enough pain of self-abandonment that I knew I never wanted to experience that again. And so now my loyalty to self is the strongest thing in my psyche, and it allowed me to withstand the pressures that would cause me to leave myself again to meet my mom's expectations or whatever. And so that was, I would say, the central thread through the whole thing. I'll just say one other thing. Like my family, I think, sort of got the picture at a certain point where they just understood that this wasn't going to change. And also I have a kind of obsessive personality, I think, in the sense of when something grabs me, and like, for example, with piano, I was on fire with piano. I was practicing every day for hours. I was not taking no for an answer. I knew that I was climbing a mountain to like learn piano in adult life and then like have a life as a professional piano player. But my obsessiveness about it was rooted in this loyalty to self. And also my family sort of had, I don't know, I think they were just like alarmed by the force of that obsession. And I think they thought I was going crazy. In my view, it was the most sane I'd ever been. And then the same thing happened again when I discovered the Enneagram, and I was like, oh my God, this thing is like,
yeah.
And then I switched my whole life again from piano to the Enneagram. So, and that transition took a while, but now I've built a life of like executive coaching. I'm doing retreats and stuff like that. I teach, writing a book. And so, I don't know, my passion for it and obsessiveness were forceful enough to, I don't know, keep out the, but it's not like it wasn't hard. It was hard. There were a lot of tough moments, and we're good now. I love my family.
I think what's coming to mind for me is your commitment to authenticity and to self. The reason that I got into therapy many years ago at this point initially was like, I didn't understand what it was that I wanted. I just kind of, it was very nine of me, kind of floated along, and, whatever didn't disturb my environment was the right choice, quote unquote. So I guess, was your authenticity or your knowledge of self, did you always have that, or was that something that you acquired along the way through life, or was it through therapy?
I love that my story is coming across as if it was easy for me to have the clarity. It's just, that just was not the reality at all. And it isn't even still. Okay. So one of the things maybe to say in terms of the Enneagram that's useful is we talk about the trifix, right? So trifix is like the combination of your body, heart, and mental types or fixes. And so my trifix is 3, 9, and 6. And those are the types. Those are all three of the types that are open and porous and receptive and influenceable by environmental input. So in the body center, adaptive in the body center, adaptive in the heart center, and then open, porous, adaptive in the mental center as well. The combination of those three in whatever order, our term for that with kind of me and my Enneagram colleagues, friends, is the Bermuda triangle, because 9, 3, and 6 are the types in the Enneagram that are most likely to be self-forgetting to lose themselves in the name of adaptation, to put relationship before self, stretching out of my actual form to accommodate a relationship, and then losing touch with who I actually am. That's the core struggle of 9, 3, and 6. And when you have them all three together in one trifix, it's like an exponent on that. And it's also the most common type or trifix in the Enneagram. So it's kind of a universal human story. And I would imagine a lot of people who listen to your podcast, or a lot of people that are in therapy, are in some version of that story. How do I be myself amidst an environment that is pulling on me in all kinds of ways? The other types in the Enneagram don't have as hard a time asserting the individuality in the face of that, but 3, 9, 6 do. Even now, I'm constantly in the project of fortifying my psychological boundaries against the pulls and enticements of, other versions of reality. Like, for example, I coach executives. Many of them are millionaires or are on track to become so, adored and admired leaders of organizations. These are all very enticing things to my 3 fantasy. And so being in touch with that world, there's a constant need to remind myself, I'm doing my thing. This is who I am, and not to get pulled into that. But there's always an undertow. There always is. I don't think it's ever going to leave.
Yeah.
So to this point of like these moments of clarity where I've had like a true moment of vision of like, okay, this is something I have to do, whether it's piano or the Enneagram. Those were, almost like spiritual epiphanies or something. Like, this is something that I have to do. And the truth of those things erupted in me in a way that was unignorable, but it doesn't often happen that way.
Yeah.
Usually the day-to-day experience, at least of myself, is of trying to find myself and re-anchor myself to the solidity that I know I am amidst the incoming fog that's always encroaching of the fog of self-forgetting.
Yeah. I think we're also catching, I don't know if catching you in this moment of like, it feels like you're really aligned and like sort of humming with your purpose in the Enneagram right now. But we've also, I've witnessed, Josh, there was a point where you were turning your piano playing into a course, and there was a point where then you were thinking about doing a video game, and there was like there's been different iterations of like exploration.
Absolutely.
And right now we're sort of catching you in this, like, it feels like you're really connected to and aligned with your passion for the Enneagram and writing a book and going for it. But I want to bring it back to the Enneagram a little bit, and I want to see if you can kind of help people understand why the Enneagram would be beneficial for mental health, and like, in what ways do you see it having an impact for people to better themselves or to understand themselves and then use it in something like therapy?
I want to add to that. Was your search for a therapist after you found out about Enneagram, was that important that the therapist had some sort of knowledge of the Enneagram?
Let me hit that first question, or the second question first. So I am really lucky because I got a therapist when I was 15 that I still see, and I'm now 38. And so, God, that's crazy. And it's not been a consistent, like, it's not like I've seen him every week for 23 years, but it's like when things are tough or when I need someone to talk to, then he's the person I would go call. And so we've had kind of phases or stretches of the relationship that are more on than off. And I also feel lucky because I think he's a genius. And he's, he's a very, very special wizard. Like he just is. And so I know it's really hard to find a therapist that feels like a fit. And that's a huge difficulty to kind of get into therapy, find the right fit, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm really lucky. I haven't had that problem. The other thing too is that just being an executive coach or taking the path that I have, I've taken so many different kinds of classes and workshops, and I've encountered other facilitators of different modalities. I've probably worked with, at this point, 10, 15, 20 kinds of people who do different modalities of inner work. And some of them are Enneagram based, some of them are not. So I would say if you like the Enneagram and you are drawn to it and are making sense of yourself in the language of the Enneagram, then I think it would be useful to have a therapist that can speak that language or is interested in going there with you or is already familiar with it. It's not necessary, but it's a very helpful pattern recognition tool for therapists.
Yeah.
And then, Jamie, regarding your question, why is the Enneagram useful for mental health? Well, typically when anyone's getting into mental health, it's not because everything's going great. There's some question you have, about what's going on with me, what's going on with my parents, or I'm really struggling or something like that, and I'm reaching for answers. And therapy does a lot of things, one of which is it helps you make sense of what's going on for you in your life, and it contextualizes and normalizes your reactions to things and all that kind of stuff. The Enneagram as a framework is probably the most robust and precise framework for making sense of the psyche and the inner world of anything I've experienced. And I've tried a lot of things, read a lot of things. And so as a framework for self-understanding, it's just very, very potent. And because it's a framework that it's not just a horizontal categorization system of, oh, you're a type 3 and therefore you're done. It's discovering your type in the Enneagram is like really just the first step. You know, the whole point of the Enneagram is working with yourself and using the Enneagram as a map for personal growth, which is really what it is. And so the vertical dimension of the Enneagram is kind of where that's where all the juice is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, well, not a lot, but some people will kind of push away from something like the Enneagram because they don't like feeling like they're put in a box. Like, oh, you
Right.
can't associate me with just some specific number and now you've got me figured out. But I agree with you. The more I've looked into it and dived into it, there's so much complexity to it and so much depth to it that it's really not about just figuring out, oh, I'm a 4, I'm a 7, and therefore I will always react in these ways. For me, the thing that's been most beneficial is understanding, well, one, it helps to know that you're not alone sometimes and that this type that you may identify with, knowing that there's lots of other people out there that kind of follow these similar patterns. But then recognizing that when we do fall into some of these patterns, that there may be a reasoning behind it, and seeing where we fit into both the negative and positive aspects of each type allows you to kind of figure out, how can I maybe change some of these patterns? Because for me, when I look at like the healthy description of the 9, I'm like, that's who I want to be. And when I see the downsides of the 9, I'm like, that's the person I don't want to be. And so I think it's really helpful just from that vantage point, and not so much like, oh, I'm being put in this box. It's really a way to figure out how these patterns you fall into and how you can maybe change things as you need.
I think that's exactly right. Like, I kind of think about it, and maybe correct me if this is a bad comparison, but I kind of think about it like if you were to finally get a diagnosis of something and understand through that diagnosis how to then navigate the world. It sort of is, it feels similar in that way. It's like, oh, this is how I operate. Gives me now guidelines to then manage and cope, and then also change and grow and adapt. I like the way you phrased it though, Blake.
I'll just add one thing, is that the punchline of the Enneagram is that you're not your type. You know, your type is a patterned and contracted way of experiencing yourself in the world. And when you work with the Enneagram, the point is to relax your type patterns so that you have more of yourself available to you. And yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. That's just like a really important thing to say. That's the whole point of the Enneagram is it makes a distinction between the personality and your essence. It depersonalizes your patterns. Another way to put it is that, you know, if you're coming into therapy and you're like, why am I this way? Or why do I procrastinate all the time? Or why can't I stop overeating? Or whatever your thing is, it helps you understand that that's not who you actually are. It's just a pattern. And like you guys were saying, you know, it's sort of an archetype of a psychological fixation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could put words to what it would look like to actually be in your essence. Like, does that mean that we would all be kind of this like same version of each other, or how would that look within being each type?
That is a great question. This is partly what my book is about. Let me say, you know, the personality is not bad, and also it's not fully dissolvable as an embodied physical being that navigates the world of sensation, gaze, and orientation. We have to have a personality that functions. Just because we interface with the world, the personality can never fully go away. But when we're anchored more in our essence, then we have more choice for how we respond to things than just reflexively engaging in our fixated patterns. So maybe that would be a way to put it, is that when you're operating from essence, you can be more intentional about how you respond. Like, for example, if you're a 9 and your reflex is to say yes when you mean no, or to accidentally go blank inside when someone asks you what you want for dinner or whatever. There's a way that operating from essence, you can kind of recover yourself more quickly. And rather than just yielding the right of way to someone else's agenda, choose whether or not you're going to yield the right of way from a self-empowered place or take a stand on something or whatever, but you recover the choice.
Wow. I love that. When you said you accidentally go blank inside, I hadn't attached accidentally to that, but that is something that I've encountered in like couples therapy before a lot when, the therapist and my partner at the time were saying, all right, so like, what is it that you need? And I
Right.
completely blank.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. So
Yeah.
the accidental part, I'm curious. I don't know what the question is there, but you did, it seemed very specific. You meant to include accidentally going blank. So I'm curious. Obviously it's not necessarily a purposeful thing. Maybe that's the intent of what you meant.
Yeah. Our psychological patterns run on a certain kind of automaticity. Going blank is not a choice for a 9. It's just a thing that happens, and we can't control our automatic responses to stuff. So I guess that's why I use the word accident. Maybe I'm not even sure if it was the correct use of the term, but it is evocative in a certain way. It's sort of like,
Yeah.
I guess what I meant by it was not something you chose. It was something that just happened. That's part of the depersonalization of, not in this, sorry, I'm not saying that in a diagnostic way, but how the Enneagram can depersonalize your patterns. You could say, I don't know, this is a linguistic distinction, but you could say it's not that I went blank, it's that a blankness showed up in me.
Oh, I like that reframing. I get a better like ending my questions with like, here's the question.
Well, that's actually, just to say, that's kind of a 9 thing, just to make an Enneagram point. 9s can sometimes have a style of speaking that is diffuse or meandering, and it's kind of like it mirrors the inner swirl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something I'm actively trying to work on. Like I'm right now in my therapy program, I'm watching back the recordings of me in a session. And when I give my reflections or like, it just goes all over the place. It frustrates me to no end. Like I really want to figure out how to be clear, concise, but also like impactful and not so aloof.
Yeah, I feel like I experienced something in class very similarly. When I say something, I'm finally like get the courage to like bring in the thing that I'm saying, and I say it in a nice like packaged way, and then the instructor is always like, "Can you say more?" And I immediately, blankness comes right back, and I'm like, "No, I cannot." That was all I had to say. Please
don't
talk
call
to
me
someone
again.
else. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
You have no idea how much this took just for me to say anything.
Yeah. It's very true.
Josh, have you, in working with your, executive clients, you bring the Enneagram into that discussion? It sounds like sometimes or maybe all the time. How have you found that has kind of benefited the conversation or the client in terms of how it reflects on their business or whatever it is that they're working on? Do you find that the Enneagram is different in the personal versus the business side of things?
So one of the things that I've been learning about, just from a practitioner's point of view, is that in the same way that as a therapist, you might have a model of childhood development in your head that is helping you contextualize and understand what the client is presenting. But when you talk to the client, you're not necessarily educating them on the psychological theory. You're just engaging with them in the content of their life. That is often how the Enneagram functions for me, including in executive coaching, where a person's showing up and I'm noticing, for example, a clear 6 pattern where they're stuck in overanalysis. They're having a hard time making a decision. They're wanting more complete information, but they're driving themselves nuts with it. I'm noticing all these patterns as an example. And as a leader, that's a tough problem to be stuck in, not being able to make decisions. And so there's a way to work with the client with that awareness that doesn't bring in the Enneagram. And that's its own version of kind of intervention. And then there's also the kind of psychoeducation part where you can kind of bring in the Enneagram and explain this is kind of the structure. But having tried the latter approach a few times, more than a few times, one of the things that I've noticed is that it isn't really helpful that much unless you can teach the whole Enneagram or give them a clear sense of what their type is in contrast with. Because part of the power of the Enneagram, and I think this is why it's important to learn the Enneagram in totality, if you're going to learn it at all, is because when you learn, for example, like if I'm talking to a type 6 and I'm like, well, I think you might be a 6, and 6s struggle with analysis paralysis and uncertainty. It's sort of like, duh, like you're not teaching me anything. But if then you learn that type 5s have a totally different approach, and this is an alternative way to inhabit one's inner world and to interface with reality, and then you give examples of 5s and how they've navigated business decisions, and you can kind of, and then talk about 3s and how they've done it, then it's kind of like you have a different palette to draw from or to learn from, rather than just like understanding the inner workings of your own type, because you're already swimming in your own type structure. Yeah, I guess that maybe that's the point. It's like I have found explaining people's types to them without sharing the whole Enneagram lands as a sort of anticlimax, because it's kind of like,
Gotcha.
well, I mean, I already knew this about myself.
I think that's a good point. Sort of exploring the Enneagram as a whole. I think that people can get very surface level with it once they find out their type. They kind of just like learn the basics and
Yeah.
use it as sort of like a fun, like conversation piece, but then don't really have the full understanding of the Enneagram as a tool. And I think understanding all the types is where it really then becomes a tool, because you can use it relationally as well. And that was one of our other questions, is like the impact of the Enneagram in personal relationships, and how do you use it to manage personal relationships and understand, specifically, like, I think a lot of people use it for their partnerships, but other relationships and friendships too.
Okay, I want to answer that, but also wanted to answer another part of Blake's question about what's the sort of the difference between executive and personal. Or I think that was part of your question. One of the things that I find with executive coaching versus therapy is that it's just the mental frame that a person arrives into that context with. In a therapeutic context, they're expecting you to ask about their family, to get into emotions, to ask them how they feel about certain things. In executive coaching, that's less of an expectation, at least depending on the client or how they've conceived of coaching prior to reaching out to you. And so with coaching, the distance that a person has to travel to, psychologically, to be open to that deeper personal exploration is sometimes a lot farther than if they were just showing up in therapy. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I find that to be one of the challenges of executive coaching, is to guide a client to the realization that that level of self-awareness would open up so much and actually lead to a lot more effective practical interventions for the way they lead, manage, do feedback conversations, structure their day, whatever, if they start from that deeper personal place. But there is often a kind of a journey to getting there with executive clients that maybe you could shortcut with therapy. But again, I'm not a therapist, so I don't know. Just speaking from my experience as a patient. But I guess that's kind of a good segue into your question, Jamie, because I think that relationships are the most interesting and powerful expression and use of the Enneagram. I don't know. Some Enneagram practitioners would probably slap my wrist for that, because it's supposed to be about inner work and just about you and how you relate to yourself. But applied interpersonally, that's when you really see it come to life. Oh, my partner's a 6, and that's why when I say XYZ thing, she flies off the handle, or this is the particular way in which she's reacting to this thing that I'm saying, and this is how I could phrase it better to prevent that reaction, or whatever. I'm a 3, and so my projects of self-actualization are absolutely central and important to me, and it's not just work. It's about like becoming more of who I am or something like that. So the Enneagram is a very powerful lens to forge a bridge or a wormhole between two people's inner universes and actually create a translation layer between what I'm going through and what you're going through. Entire frameworks and modalities of couples counseling are based on getting to the emotional heart of what someone is expressing, so that one person can receive in an empathic, understanding way what the other person is actually going through. The Enneagram can be a whole framework shortcut for that. It really can. One of the things it doesn't do, I'll say, is a person has to arrive at the requisite sincerity to actually empathically attune to someone else. Like, they have to have that intention going into a conversation, and the Enneagram can help with that in terms of, can help you see the blockers that you have to like cultivating that sincerity, but it is not itself like a sincerity magic pill. So there's that's part of the inner work, I guess, that's distinct from the Enneagram, or that's you have to bring to the Enneagram.
Well, and I'll just say from my own personal experience in my relationship, Enneagram has been really helpful, because knowing my wife is a 4 and she knows I'm a 9, and just kind of reading the descriptions of those types, because sometimes when we're like caught up in things, we wonder like, oh, why isn't this person reacting in the same way that I would react to this situation, or why isn't this person doing this thing that I would normally do? And we forget that we're all influenced by different things. We all have different lenses of viewing the world. And I think just having that knowledge is really helpful. Even though we all kind of know it on a fundamental level, it's easy to forget. But then recognizing that, oh, there's these different pattern types associated with this person that I love. And so once you recognize those, I think it helps you shift your own patterns in them as well, finding ways to be able to better communicate with each other in ways that we know will be more beneficial, or knowing that, hey, if I I say it this way, that's not going to be beneficial because they don't respond well to that type of thing. Just having that fundamental knowledge has been really, really helpful for both of us, I think. And my wife's gotten so into it, she's got her whole team at work taking the Enneagram test so that everyone can kind of have a good understanding of how everybody functions and works together. Again, personally, like that's one of the big reasons why I really like the Enneagram. It's been really helpful in that way.
You brought in a good thing. Like, I think I did it with a former team of mine, and it was so helpful. People were like, oh, okay, wait, and now I know how it is that you like to bring information to a meeting or whatever the case may be. But having the knowledge of all of the personality types of the people on your team, like that helps in so many different ways, and navigating conflict or disturbances or whatever the case may be. So I've seen that. I've definitely seen it in my personal relationships, but like even work relationships, I'm like, it's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and I would imagine, Josh, that as your like executive clients become familiar with each of the types and knowing what their employees or the people they work with, kind of being able to recognize, hey, okay, so I'm working with a 5 here or 7 here. Some people may want more praise. Some people may want, recognition in different ways. They have different ways that they're motivated. Being able to recognize that, I imagine, would be very helpful as a leader in how to motivate your employees.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just last week was traveling to give some workshops for teams. And I actually I love doing that work, and it's super powerful for teams.
I'm wondering if maybe this isn't kosher, but we could do like a little real time, like, what would your recommendation be for 3 9s who are running a business together in how to effectively communicate and also like not all sort of let each other sort of like, I think we're really good at giving each other space, and I like that aspect of us, but also how to then also make decisions and be a little bit more assertive with each other.
I'm happy to go there. What issues have come up?
I don't think we've had issues per se, but I think that maybe it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we have direction, but not sort of the powerful sense of clarity that you were describing in sort of your experience. I think it feels like we're like, this is fun. Let's keep having these conversations and let's keep doing this thing. But like the clarity of purpose maybe isn't there. And also like goal setting and really having a sense of like where this is going to be. We've talked about it a little bit, but I don't think that it's like...
I think that's a good way to put it, Jamie. I think we all have like a general idea of what this is about, but we're all going with the flow as well. So we're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good, without any specific clear direction sometimes.
Yeah. To add on to that, I think the fire that you described when you were learning piano and you had made that decision and it was clear. I don't know. I'll only speak to my own experience in like learning something new or diving into a business venture or school. Like the fire that you described is not necessarily there. So maybe that's part of this as well.
What are you guys wanting the podcast to do for you?
I'll speak for myself. I would like it to be as much of like a growth in education for me as it is for the listeners, and also a means of growing professionally and like bringing on guests who would be really valuable to men's mental health, helping to get men to open up more and actually be in therapy and like make the decision to go do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we usually start off each episode by saying this is to destigmatize mental health for men. And I know when I started my other thing as well, my goal was if I could help one person, then that would feel good. But then the bar continues to move and, it's like, okay, I think I've helped the one person. Now can I help 10 people? So I think that would be my goal, is knowing clearly that this has been beneficial and helpful to some group of people.
How are you tracking that?
Engagement, probably like comments. And we get some people messaging us saying, we listened to this episode and it really meant something to me, or I got something from it. Specifically, we did an episode on Christian Science, and that has been the most impactful. And so it's been,
interesting.
I think, in helping to sort of talk about the mental health aspects of, leaving a religion and the impacts of the religion. So that was cool. But I think that's sort of our only metric is response.
Well, just a couple of impressions. The dynamic with 9s is that it's sort of just, a collective version of the internal cauldron-esque swirl that we talked about a little bit ago, where there's a sort of okayness with whatever. And that like clear, distinct directionality is actually in the Enneagram symbol. It's represented by the 9's line to 3, where we didn't really talk about this, but part of working with the Enneagram, when you kind of get into it, is each type on the symbol is connected to 2 other types via lines inside the diagram. And so 9 is connected to types 6 and 3. And those represent kind of directions of both growth and kind of stress. And we could get into it. But 9 going to 3 represents a way that 9, which is typically, at least in its average or fixated states, in a state of diffusion, a state of it's not clear exactly where I am in the world begins. I'm not exactly clear in terms of what my vision is for myself, my ambition for myself. I'm not exactly sure what I need in a distinct, clear-eyed way. 9 moving to 3 represents 9 becoming distinct, drawing its boundaries in a little more permanent marker, having a clear sense of its vision, and then doing what it needs to actually manifest its potential and shine in the style of healthy 3. So 9 is very, as a body type, doesn't want to have to answer to unnecessary and unwanted obligations or environmental pressures. And setting a goal for oneself can start to function as a kind of pressure that I have to meet. And as much as there might be a desire to have goals and to stop being so diffuse and actually declare what I want and where I'm going, there is also a subtle passive resistance to goal setting, because it means actual commitment into something that I have to summon myself into on a consistent basis. And I can't just kind of swirl around in my, what feels good to me right now, peaceful, settled 9 thing. So as a collective, the 3 of you guys, I wouldn't do this in a super like gung-ho assertive, let's get our shit together and conquer the world type of way. I don't know that would be congruent with you guys, but as you kind of wading towards and moving in the direction of establishing what your kind of collective ambition is for the show, and what like the scale of impact would be a good one, or the types of guests that you guys would want, and specificity is really helpful here. Like, for example, if there are people that you admire that you wouldn't be able to get on the show unless the show was X size, then it's like, okay, well, if we want this guest, then we got to be
That's encouraging. I think that it's helpful to hear, and I think we've kind of like, it's making me feel a little better about our progress. Like, I think we've had some of those conversations and been doing more of that than I realize, and so that's helpful. And I think that one of my fears is also that like we get down the road and that we've grown into a place that feels stagnant, or we've plateaued, and that we don't then further keep pushing ourselves. But I think so far we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think so.
There's also a little bit of like fear of success too.
Yeah.
Where I think I self-sabotage sometimes, when not necessarily this podcast, but other things too. But like, what if this podcast got really big, and then would that feel like a lot of pressure, and like would want to make sure that all of our messaging felt, exactly right and didn't make any mistakes. That's like a background fear for me.
Totally. To Josh's point, it's like that then starts to put on that pressure of like an obligation that we then have to do, and 9's like to sort of feel that freedom in it. So it's like, slower growth is better for us, so that we can still find that like sense of freedom within this project.
Well, it comes back to the authenticity that you were talking about as well, Josh. Like, I think that's an important thing for us too, is like, we want this to feel authentic, and that like all in, guns a-blazing, like, take over the world, like you were talking about, that probably wouldn't be authentic to any of us. And so I think that's a good reminder. Thanks for giving us a quick diagnosis, for lack of a better word.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, amazing. Josh, thank you so much for doing this podcast. We really appreciate you coming on. Having guests is newer to us, and so having a guest as eloquent and thoughtful as you has been really fun. I
really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'd love for you to just sharing sort of like how to find you, what you're doing currently, that sort of stuff, like a little self-plug.
Sure, yeah. I am writing a book. That won't be out for a little while, but you can find my Enneagram work at theenneagramschool.com. I'm actually currently just brushing up on my latest kind of batch of type descriptions, so those are going up on the website soon.
Okay, cool.
You can check out on the Enneagram School, we have interviews with people of each type, and you can browse them by type or by instinctual stacking and all that kind of stuff on the website. We also have an intro course. Poke around the website, and if you're an executive and you'd like some coaching, then you can reach out also to the Enneagram School website, or you can also check out my executive coaching website, which is just joshlavine.com.
Yeah, we'll definitely put all those links down in the description. And thank you, Josh. This has been amazing.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks.
This was really, no, it's really fun. Thank you guys.